And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. A total of 351 commissioners were appointed to coordinate the 1901 census. In some cases, members of the Northwest Mounted Police were used as enumerators. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives as Elizabeth Holmes shares about the early days of Terrace.
Elizabeth Holtham was only 5 years old back in 1901 when her parents and other members of her family decided to leave behind their native Austria-Hungary and head for the vast unknown that was the Canadian prairies. But she remembers it well, starting with a 3-week-long ocean voyage.
Mostly I remember getting on this big boat and we had to sleep in bunks. There's 3 families traveled together, three of us, my mother's family and us and another family, friends. In the morning, everybody had gone out and I was left in bed because I was seasick all night. And in the morning, then the steward came along to clean the floors. I remember that best. And I turned sick and I didn't have time to get down. And I looked down over, he was just cleaning the floor. And he started to talk to me. Of course, I couldn't understand a word of English. And I don't know what he said. I guess it was just as well because I didn't get up and go to the bathroom. That I remember well. See,
her father, Matthias Jacob, homesteaded in Saskatchewan. The prairies were so flat and fertile that the immigrants could scarcely believe it.
I thought they were beautiful. They were just beautiful. You could see as far as your eye, well, as far as you could see. And I remember all the beauty of the flowers, the prairie flowers. I think I remember those most of all, the flowers.
Do you remember your first winter there?
I do. And it was cold. Like in the old country, we had no winters. They were just you know, mild. You just had probably a bit of rain. But I remember the prairie winters quite well. The first few years, when it snowed, it piled the snow up in great big heaps. And in a day and a night, there you would have a regular little mountain that you got on the top and rode down with your sleighs. That was fun, yeah.
But the little girl found something even more memorable than that.
Well, the thing I remember mostly for the first couple of days in Canada was that white bread. My grandmother wanted me to have something to eat. And I liked the brown bread, and we had a sack when we left the old country, we had just brown bread in a sack. You brought it along. Well, you could bring along what you wanted, but you got your meals on the boat. But I remember looking for that sack. There was a little crust left in it. But what I disliked about it is white. And my grandmother wet the bread and then put sugar on, just so that because I wouldn't eat. I just didn't like the food that you got here, the white bread especially.
Elizabeth Holtham remembers all the great technological advances of the century. The telephone, radio, television, seeing a car for the first time.
We didn't know what it was. I had chums in Weyburn, Saskatchewan. By then we had moved to a different place. I remember seeing that this couple with this car. The funniest thing I ever saw was those wheels going around, and this 2 couples sitting, and he had a hold of something at the front.
From this era came her favorite memory of all, 1910's visit of Halley's Comet. This century, as we all know, has also been filled with conflict and disasters, and Elizabeth Holtham remembers them all. The sinking of the Titanic in 1912. 2 years later, her new country went to war against her old, making it tough on a family that spoke with a German accent.
It was hard because you were German. We talked the English language, but they were sure hard on you because they just didn't quite trust you. But it didn't take long for them to understand that my father was naturalized and everything, so were we. But that was pretty tough. They called us the Dutchies.
Then there was the Second World War, when her twin sons were sent overseas. By this time, the Holthams were living in Kelowna. Both sons came back in one piece. In between the wars, there was the Depression and the Prairie Dust Bowl. Her husband, Herbert, lost his job when the grain elevators closed down. They turned to farming, but even Mother Nature seemed angry.
The crop blew out of there wasn't anything left. The seed all blew out. There was no crop that year. And the next year, we got hail, and everything was down by hail. You couldn't reap a crop by then. So that was the end of our farming.
The Depression saw the Holthams finally head west for the mountains of British Columbia.
Yes, I thought it was the most beautiful country ever. I thought I was in heaven, wherever that is. We came by car, and it was a lovely drive.
By the time the Holthams came to the Northwest, Herbert was close to retirement age, but he still had time to assist in the startup of Alcan's Kitimat Works and be part of the birth of a community.
They wanted men, 20 men, to fly them in that would help build the wharf in Kelowna, in Kitimat, saying in 6 months you'll be able to have a house back in there. But there too has changed so much.
The Northwest has changed greatly in her 4 decades here. Paved roads everywhere, a rail line to Kitimat, new subdivisions. The world at large has changed too. We don't take slow boats across the ocean anymore, we fly, and men have walked on the moon. But Elizabeth Holtham worries about where we're heading and what we're doing to this planet.
Yeah, it's a wonderful world we're living in. But what is it going to be like in another 20 years? How much will there be left of it, the way it's going now? When that oil starts to burn, the oil that's running even into the ocean.
She says there's still too much suffering in the world, particularly among the children. But overall, Elizabeth Holtham says it's been a terrific 95 years.
I've seen a lot of life. I could relate it better when, if I I'd go to bed some nights and can't sleep, then I just can recall every bit of it from the beginning.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. The first recorded tax in Canada appears to date back to 1650, an export tax of 50% on all beaver pelts and 10% on moose hides were levied on the residents of New France. Let us return to the archives to discover how taxes affect tourism.
As Canadians, we can be assured of a number of events occurring in our country. The inevitability of winter comes to mind right off the top, but perhaps more prevalent and even more consistent is concern regarding taxation. From federal tax to provincial tax to municipal tax, the majority of Canadians have felt the pinch sometime or another. But with the advent of the goods and services tax, it's made making a living tougher for individuals and businesses alike. The latest group to vocally submit its disapproval is the British Columbia and Yukon Hotels Association. In addition to the regular everyday taxation we are all faced with, lodging facilities in the province must charge a flat hotel tax of 5%. The provincial association is demanding that tax be lowered The sooner, the better.
Right now, our association is looking at the provincial sales tax, asking the government to lessen it to 6%, I believe, and that would have a great effect on our occupancy here. I'm sure that we could draw more people to come and stay with us, or in fact stay longer.
Staying longer has also been made more difficult by the GST. For the first time, Canadians and foreign visitors have been saddled with a tax pointed directly at services required. Hotel operators in the Northwest know all too well about the ramifications of the goods and services tax.
With the added tax of GST, we've seen a sharp decline, especially in August. And August is a big month for us in the way of occupancy, so we've seen a sharp decline. In that sense, GST plays a great factor, and it's an added tax on hotel rooms now, and it's affected us.
Plus, what other kind of taxes we're talking about?
Well, we've got an 8% room tax, provincial room tax as well, so adding those two together, you've got 15% tax on, say, an average $60 room rate, and it's affected us.
Remember at the start of this story, I mentioned Canadians know all too well about the problems associated with the seemingly never-ending taxation. In the hotel industry, concerns are magnified by the fact that business deals with many more people than Canadians alone. Our neighbors to the south play a big role in the success of hotel and motel facilities across the province. When our U.S. cousins failed to pay a visit, it cost northwestern British Columbia dearly.
Sure, we notice a great decline in the number of Americans from California and from Washington traveling to our area. And also, I think that we could say, I don't have great numbers or anything, but I think that we could say that the number of locals, the British Columbians, the rubber tire traffic is down this year as well. And they still may be traveling through our area. However, they're not spending the time at the hotels and the motels as they used to. People would come to our area and spend a great length of time because there are so many different things to do in our outdoors around this area and things to see. So they would come and normally spend 3, 4, 5 days, and now they're just passing through and heading onwards. A lot of people are heading up towards Alaska.
Looking back on the summer of 1991, one would guess the BC hotel industry suffered greatly. Battling the dreaded tax and working its way through a recession wasn't easy. However, other businesses in the province suffered as well, and actually helped many hotels out by trying aggressive means of getting ahead.
The only thing that really kept us going this summer, the strong point that kept us going this summer as far as occupancy is concerned, is that because the economy was fairly slow in the early part of our year, a lot of our business people kept traveling throughout the summer and kept trying to promote business in the areas that they traveled to. So we had a lot of business people staying with us this summer, which we don't often see during the summer months.
But hope springs eternal for the hotel business as well as everyone else. And it's Debbie McIntyre's feeling, with a change here and there, better days will indeed lie ahead.
I would say that if we work our way into the fall and into the spring and into the summer and we don't see a change, it's going to have a great effect on the industry, in the sense that it's very difficult for a lot of the smaller operators in motels and hotels to operate under such low occupancies. And I strongly believe we could see business shutdowns because of it. A lot of layoffs. You have to think of the staff involved. It's directly involved with occupancy rates, and there could be a lot of layoffs and things like that. And if we don't see a change before next summer, there'll be great effects.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Go at your dog's pace, make the reward worthwhile, and never punish are 3 of the 5 golden rules according to some dog trainers. Let us return to the archives as Cleo Laxton shares some of her golden rules.
Sit. Sit.
These dogs are here to learn how to be proper canine citizens, and they will be after 10 weeks with Cleo Laxton.
Make Jake sit in front. I haven't told you to finish him.
Laxton is a dog obedience trainer. She's also a dog lover. She's proudly owned one kind of hound or another for the last 30 years. In 1964, Laxton started teaching dogs good manners. Laxton began training Northwest Pooches 5 years ago, or should I say, Northwest Pooch owners.
We don't teach your dog. We teach you how to train your dog.
The basic thing I've learned is it's not really training the dog, it's training yourself to be consistent in your commands, and if you're not doing that, it's just really confusing to the dog.
Dog training can be compared to putting a child through school.
Everyone walk past your dog and stand at the end of the lead behind them.
This class is equivalent to elementary school. The dogs are usually around 6 months old. It's their first taste of the classroom, a good chance to mingle with other dogs. That's a lesson in itself.
First night at classes is almost trauma for the dogs because there's all these strange dogs and all the dogs are barking and carrying on, and all of a sudden Fido, instead of running the household, is being made behave.
You're taking a dog for a walk. If they've been taught around other dogs, it's no real big deal for them to deal with passing a dog in the street. Or the dog that's traveling in a car, and when there's some dogs that are almost going through the window at other dogs, chances are those dogs haven't been to obedience class and having worked among dogs.
Educators say this class is a must if you want a good, responsible pet.
We teach you the basics of heeling on lead. That's where the dog walks quietly at your left side and sits when you stop. And to come when called, and to what we term finish, go around to the heel position, to sit stay, to down stay, to stand for examination. And that's very handy when you go to the vets or you've bathed your dog and you want to dry it. You make it stand stay and you can do it, or if you want to brush them. And all these exercises are good canine citizen exercises, what every dog should know.
The schooling doesn't stop there. Next comes what's called Companion Dog Excellent, or if you like, high school. Then for the ambitious, both the pet and its owner, an even more advanced course called Utility Dog.
And that's where they do a lot of work with no leads, hand signals, jumping, directed retrieve type stuff, and it's like college.
Post-secondary ed.
Yeah. And then I want you to make sure your dog stays down and doesn't bother the other dogs.
This novice class is held once a week for an hour, but there's more to it than that. That's right, homework. And Laxton says if you forget to practice at home, trouble may arise.
And if you put in the time that's recommended, your dog learns an awful lot. If you don't put in the time, then your dog just doesn't learn because you're not teaching it.
How much time are we looking at then?
We suggest 2 15-minute sessions at least a day.
This Terrace woman agrees. Linda Roberts has 2 standard poodles. Both 2-year-old Poppy and 8-year-old Frankie are enrolled in obedience school. However, they're a bit ahead of their classmates. Roberts has been doing exercises with them since they were little. She has spent many hours laying the groundwork.
Often I make a big game of it, and often I do sit, come down, and their tricks, and it's not really a training session per se, but yes, they learn, and it's a way of pleasing me. So it's sort of a daily routine.
Frankie and Poppy are quick learners and usually very well behaved. But remember, all dogs are different. Some students are more stubborn than others.
Sit. It shouldn't. Sit. Sit.
This particular class was a little more obstinate than usual.
It's one of the more difficult classes I've had since I was here because we've had a number of very aggressive dogs in both the beginners and in this novice class. And just cycled that way. And the next class could be just perfect angels.
But when the dogs do get serious and pay attention, they work hard. So hard, they deserve something in return.
And then stroke their heads, remember? And the reward can be a verbal praise, a nice little look down at it. Good boy, good girl, that's what I want. And they also work when they're doing the wrong, they get a correction. So when you make a correction, you have to praise them and tell them, which is a verbal, or petting them is another reward, and that's what they work for.
Food is also used as a reward, but not as often.
It comes in at the unexpected time, the food treat. We don't do it consistently because you don't always have that treat with you. But you always have your voice, you always have your hand.
Linda Roberts wants Frankie and Poppy to earn all 3 dog obedience titles. Not all pet owners want to go that far, so for those people who are just interested in a well-behaved puppy, words of wisdom from the dog training expert herself.
Don't let it do something that you don't want it to do the rest of its life with you. In other words, if you want to housebreak it, you confine it and take it out till it relieves itself, and then watch it every minute. If you don't want it to jump at the kids, don't let it jump at the kids. Discipline it. Like raising a child, you teach it the ground rules right from the day you bring it home.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
For decades, we produced the bulk of our foods through industrial agriculture, a system dominated by large farms growing the same crops year after year. But a growing number of innovative farmers are taking a different path. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives as Bill Hayes shares why his farming system is more sustainable.
When I go in and select the trees I want to harvest, it's done with the goal of having an uneven age forest. In other words, I'll have some older trees, some middle-aged trees, and some very young trees. So when you go into the forest, it basically covers all the different strata, the vertical stratum. When you look, you'll see trees at all different levels. And I feel, from my point of view, that's the most efficient way of utilizing a forest. You never cut it down, you never clear cut, you're always being very specific. For the fields, divided into the 8 different sections, the main thing there is to increase the productivity of the soil, while at the same time having a very efficient economic unit. And you do that basically with combining grasses with legumes, like legumes such as peas or clovers and that. They add nitrogen to the soil, and it's a very important component of having a field ecosystem, having it sustainable. The annual plants, basically I'll never grow the same thing in the same spot. I move to one area and I'll grow the plants there, and on another area I'll be having things like legumes being the main cover crop, which I will put into the soil as a green manure. So I'm enriching the soil. So when I plant my annual garden there the following year, I generally do not have to add any fertilizers at all, because the soil itself has stored those nutrients. So it becomes then my annual garden.
A garden is divided between berries, perennial crops, and the annual crop. The berries move on a rotational basis.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.